The World War II buildup of U.S. forces in the United Kingdom, called Operation Bolero, was accomplished largely in the 12 months preceding D-Day. In the 5 months from January through May alone, the number of American forces in the United Kingdom was doubled, rising from 774,000 in December 1943 to 1,527,000 in May 1944. The U.S. Army Transportation Corps developed procedures governing the movement of American men and materials into ports and their distribution into the mainstream of heavily burdened transportation facilities to their destinations in the United Kingdom, and ultimately onto the far shore. The Transportation Corps headquarters in London got its first inkling of what to expect from the cargo loading cable dispatched for each outbound vessel by the U.S. port of embarkation. The cargo loading cable contained a general description of the cargo in the ship, by hatch and deck level, intended primarily to facilitate the selection of a port of discharge in the United Kingdom. The manifest listing enabled the supply services to nominate depots for the reception of the cargo. Approximately 1 week before the estimated time of arrival ETA of the convoy, the British Ministry of War Transport met to determine the port best suited to receive the vessel. This meeting included all those interested in importing, warehousing, shipping, receiving, and moving cargo, as well as the British Quartermaster General Movements and the U.S. Transportation Corps. The final decision was sometimes a compromise, since the most conveniently located port with respect to the destination of the bulk of the cargo might already be too congested to accommodate additional shipping. Factors such as the availability of berths and labor, the ship's draft, special types of cargo handling equipment that might be required, and the availability of transport to the interior were all taken into consideration. The British Ministry of War Transport, of course, considered ships other than those from the U.S., selecting ports for as many as 500 ships a month. The U.S. Army Transportation Corps headquarters tentatively selected a port and determined which depot in the U.K. should receive the cargo. If the ship's manifest arrived early enough, a definite port allocation was made. The UK Chief of Transportation notified the interested port commander and chiefs of services. After a final revision of desired destinations, the Freight Branch in Transportation Corps headquarters prepared cargo disposal instructions, showing the number of the vessel, port of discharge, date of berthing, type of cargo, destination to which the cargo was to be moved and the suggested means of transport, including the British service involved. In the case of shipments by rail, the railway to be used in the UK and the destination depot or the station nearest to the destination were also shown. These instructions were distributed to U.S. port commanders, all chiefs of services, as well as regional transportation officers or RTOs who were integral to the overall procedure. Cargo disposal instructions ordinarily were in the hands of the port commanders and the transportation agencies concerned 48 hours before the vessel was to be berthed, in order to give them time to plan for discharge and port clearance. As the cargo was dispatched from the UK port to a depot, the RTO at the port notified the proposed depot commander through his own RTO colleague by means of a teletyped traffic dispatch advice, giving the number of the carrier, lorry or train wagon, a brief description of its contents, and the time of dispatch from the port. So far as inbound troops were concerned, Washington normally notified the UK Theatre Chief of Transportation by cable of contemplated shipments and later informed him of the convoys with which the units were scheduled to sail. On the basis of this information, the Transportation Corps headquarters obtained the UK destinations desired and published a forecast of arrivals for the use of all agencies involved. When the convoys sailed, the U.S. ports of embarkation cabled confirmation directly to the UK Chief of Transportation, who then set in motion the arrangements for reception of the units and their movement inland. In the case of the RMS Queen Elizabeth and RMS Queen Mary, which crossed so quickly and carried such large numbers that the usual sailing cable did not allow enough time to prepare for debarkation, an earlier cable notice was sent that might be only 80% correct as to numbers and units and yet would enable planning to begin in the UK, before the final cable arrived. Upon receipt of the sailing cable from the US port, the Transportation Corps Passenger Branch in London met with representatives of Quartermaster General Movements and the British Railways to work out the details of securing rail equipment, scheduling trains, and planning stops for meals. Movement instructions were prepared and jointly signed by the US Army UK Chief of Transportation and the British Director of Movements. Indicating the port and date of arrival and the strength of units, the instructions were issued to the port commanders and RTOs concerned. For large shipments, the main difficulty was to obtain enough railway equipment without disrupting British traffic. Because of the possibility of enemy air action and the pressure for a quick turnaround of transports, it was necessary to effect prompt debarkation and clearance of incoming passengers. Since trains ran on closed schedules, their loading and departure had to be timed to the minute. Indeed, the scheduling of trains dictated the entire debarkation procedure. The debarkation of troops, like the discharge and clearance of cargo, was the responsibility of the port commander. Before the vessel docked, his boarding party informed the troops on security regulations and gave the transport commander and unit commanders the plan of debarkation. Upon debarkation, the troops, under the guidance of a RTO, marched directly from the pier to trains waiting nearby. After supervising their entrainment and completing arrangements for refreshment stops, the RTO notified his colleague at the point of destination. At the end of the rail journey, the men were met by the RTO in charge of their onward movement to the assigned camp or billet, which might be reached on foot or by truck. The flow of American traffic in the United Kingdom involved the coordination of shipping, port facilities, inland transportation, as well as the interests of the various U.S. supply services. To facilitate this procedure, it was felt necessary to establish BUCO, the build-up and control organization, responsible for managing the flow of troops, vehicles, and cargo from southern England to Normandy. After D-Day, U.S. troops were funneled through the port of Southampton to the continent, sometimes arriving at ports in the north of the country and embarking at the port via rail within 18 hours. Yet in the beginning this transfer did not always proceed smoothly. Major William B. or Shop Shepherd, working at BUCO, located in the Civic Centre at Southampton, says, "We were responsible for moving most of the 3rd Army and 20 Corps across the Channel. I never worked so hard in my life." The system for moving troops to the far shore was based on previously established priority tables called build-up priority tables. There was a BUCO build-up control organization at Southampton and Little BUCO on the continent. A shipping schedule was worked out, but this broke down due to some units being lost, others not arriving on time, or because of the inability to obtain proper equipment. Part of the Chief of Staff's job was that of making an educated guess as to when a unit will be ready and then assigning it to a shipping date. This schedule then had to be worked out with BUCO, who did the shipping. To add to the confusion, phantom telephone calls would be received from Army requesting that certain units be immediately shipped. Sometimes these units were not ready or had not even arrived. The connections were always bad and guesses had to be made as to just what unit and strength were required. Other times units would be ready ahead of schedule and the Navy had to be persuaded to take them as soon as possible. The joint aim being to keep the boats running continuously. It is a tribute to the hard work and determination of all those agencies involved that these procedures were effective and that the tactical needs of the beachhead troops always took priority.